Okay, so I'm going to try to not walk around too much so I don't fall off the stage, as I've already fallen downstairs. So I've learned that doesn't really work so well. So good morning, I'm Cathy Southwick, and I'm from AT&T. And I have kind of a unique role. What we've done within AT&T is we've actually combined what was our IT infrastructure, so all of our IT engineering, along with all of our network engineering organizations. So within my team, we actually do both the infrastructure, all the capacity planning, engineering, et cetera, for all the layers of the network, with the exception of RAN and RF. And then I have all the IT infrastructure as well. So everything we've done for our cloud deployments and supporting of all of our applications. And why that's important is because that's really kind of set some of the stage for our journey on why we've made some changes, what's given us some confidence to do some things that maybe others weren't maybe quite as comfortable doing just yet. And as we kind of tell our story and share a little about where we're headed, we think it's really important for others to kind of see it, reflect on it, not only kind of look at their own organization, but also to provide us feedback and help us to either provide ideas or suggestions or things, and actually help us and participate within the open communities that we're participating in. So for us, we talk a lot, and some of you may have seen this slide before. We've actually used this quite a bit. And it's really talking about where we see our journey. And you saw a lot of it earlier on the previous speaker's notes as well, where we talk about that this isn't a go do one thing and then you're done. It's really a journey about where you're going and what you're committing your technology, your leadership, your organization, and how you operate as a service provider. And I'm going to talk a lot about that at the end, because I think that's a really important factor as we see our role starting to evolve and change. And a lot of the questions that were being asked about, why would someone like an Ericsson, want to open up some of their, some of the areas that are very proprietary. And I think the gentleman left, so he's not here right now. But the, from a service provider, we're actually looking at things on a much grander scale, looking at our role we play as a service provider, but who our competition isn't necessarily the same players that we've always operated within. The kind of workloads and the demands we're seeing from the market are very different. And so if we were to sit and kind of do the same things we've been doing, one, we wouldn't be able to grow and scale, but more importantly, we wouldn't be able to actually operate within a market. So we would actually see a huge erosion of our customers' needs, both from the things that we're trying to solve for today, as well as the use cases that we see as we go forward. And I'll talk a little bit about that. So when we talk about the network to us is more than just another G, and because we often get very focused on, and rightfully so, huge important part of our ecosystem is obviously our mobile network. But really we start to think about where we've come from, being in a very single vendor role where we were very good about picking products and bringing them in, and you basically were just implementing products that existed. We moved then into this journey that said, what we called Network 1.0, that said you start to move away from having just one vendor, and you start having a little bit broader ecosystem, but still very much proprietary, single type of vendors in single spaces, and that's pretty much how we've been operating as well. Our role in that case was more of an integration. As we looked at where we started to evolve on the Network 2.0, cloud optimization, we actually see ourselves in our journey right now between the 1.0, actually we kind of span the whole thing, because all of us, know, if you're a large service provider, you've got, network layers that are across all the areas. So this isn't I flip a switch and now we're good and we're done. So for us, we have this journey, and every area of our network has a little bit different path, a little bit different timeline. We're doing quite a few things that we've modeled as far as like in the cloud space. We're on the architecture side. From what we did and learned on the IT side from an application perspective, we've been working in open communities for decades, and we've actually been on a pretty massive journey for our IT applications to move them from proprietary, independent proprietary operating systems onto a standardized, Linux platform that allows us to somewhat operate on a ubiquitous platform. So following that same model for the network on that same journey. And then moving into the very end, and I'll spend just a minute at the very end talking about where we see ourselves eventually getting to, where we call Indigo as being AT&T as a platform company, where it's a matter of taking all the different technologies that we have, not looking at them as verticals, but looking at them how we integrate across all of them to actually create capabilities for our customers that don't exist today. And you can stop me as well. I know that we don't have to keep it so structured and formal. So for us, we've talked a lot, and you've heard us talk about the 75%. So we break this into kind of two components. The first component is looking at the functions themselves. So again, looking specifically at the network functions, that we need to be able to actually create functions that can be virtualized or use functions. Those are both internally being developed, those are externally being consumed from different vendors in our ecosystem, as well as going into the open source community. So we kind of look at this as it's a mixed solution and a mixed ecosystem for how you're going to solve for it. And if you believe you can only solve with one angle, for us at our scale, it doesn't make sense. So that's why we have set some of these goals out here that we will have. We are virtualizing the network functions, and then the traffic will follow after that. So that's kind of the path that we're on. I'll show you a slide on that. Probably the bigger message around this is that there's not just one thing you have to do. It's not about saying, I now have this very cool technology, and I now can do this particular function, and I have this capability. It's really about everything in the ecosystem that has to follow. So if I'm doing things that are on the platform level, so if I'm creating a capability, as an example, like our AT&T Integrated Cloud, our AIC platform itself, then you've got to create functions that will actually run on it. You've also got to have platform capabilities like ONF that we use. You also have to have the ability to traverse the different kind of maturity of each of those areas as they mature through their own life cycle. We've done things as far as how we think about the virtual functions and said, well, gosh, if we're going to start going down this path where we're expecting a lot to come from the open environment or the open source community, we need to start setting what we believe are, I wouldn't call them necessarily standards, we actually call them guidelines and a certification process to help enable that. And those are areas that we're publishing out to say, here's what we're seeing as far as a virtual network function, here's what it looks like, here's how it behaves, here's the characteristics, here's the throughput that's expected, here's what we expect it to do when it's operating within our environment, here's the kind of heat template that you need to be using. So a whole barrage of requirements and guidelines that we are publishing so that we can actually have something that we can work within the ecosystem, both open source and with our vendor partners to actually kind of work through this. The other real piece that's not on here is that on top of all this, so looking at your platform level, looking at your what we call eComp and also then using ONF, and then also looking at how we do the virtual network functions, the other key element is we are under a massive skills transformation within our company. So that means that we've got folks that are in development teams, in engineering teams who had traditional skills and capabilities before, that they manage purpose-built switches, routers, et cetera, and that's what they did, to now saying that, well, that no longer exists. That provider edge router is now a virtual function. It runs on our AT&T Integrated Cloud. So you're no longer managing a particular box or piece of hardware. You're now managing a software element that's running on top of a platform. So when you're doing that, the skills transformation of our employees is a massive point. I should have had it on the slide. I had a different slide earlier. But that's a real key message, that this doesn't happen by just saying, I'm going to go adopt this technology and I'm going to go to the market, I'm going to go buy this or do this, which is partially what I think service providers might have done more so in the past. This is really about saying we need to take our employees and we need to bring them along the journey. So we have everything from leader-led classes to training to certifications to degree programs that are being done throughout our entire ecosystem within the technology space. So that spans both our IT technology as well as in our network space as well, and all the layers of the network. So, and again, all different paths that each layer is on. So I talked a little bit about why we set some of these goals. And you've seen us, you've probably heard us talk before about the need for some of this virtualization and this journey we're on. It wasn't because we thought, wow, great, we want to go do something new and start to drive the industry. We were looking at really the growth that we're seeing in our data. We're looking at the growth that we're expected. And we started layering that into what are we actually going to be able to achieve. So there were some initial drivers that said we will not be able to scale and we will not be able to meet market demands in the time frame that we believe we need to do it. So we've actually, our journey is mapped against what we think is our traffic patterns. We've got expectations. We've actually had commitments on when we think we'll stop buying in certain areas because we believe we'll be at the right level of virtualization and capability and maturity. And so we've got teams that actually look at the traversing of what do I look like today? Where am I going? What's the maturity level? Can I get there in enough time? Can I stop buying what we'll call a D1.0 or 1.5 and go all full into 2.0? So this is this isn't that we just threw some numbers. This is all based on what we see our growth and our patterns looking like for AT&T. So I mentioned earlier ONAP, and we see this again. It's the ONAP version is the one that's in the open market, and the Linux Foundation, they've been great partners with us, and this is such an important also part of the ecosystem. And again, I mean, you hear me use the word ecosystem. I'm not using that lightly. I'm using it because I think this is a big change for us in that how we thought about things, whether it was buying something particular or it was trying to create a piece of software. It has to all work as one collective area, and there's different levels of maturity. And so in the case of ONAP, we're really excited about this and helping to bring this along with some of our other partner or peer service providers who've looked at this, who've worked with us, helped us to figure out what makes sense. Linux Foundation was instrumental in bringing this into the Linux Foundation and making this as an available capability. We use an internal version, which you hear us refer to as eComp. That's where it was born from internally, and that obviously doesn't make sense in the open market. So the real opportunity here is the speed of innovation and the ability to create capabilities so it's both speed and innovation. So when I think about why are we so bullish on doing this, we had to figure out a way to create something that allowed us some interoperability across multiple areas of the network. So in AT&T's world, when we thought about our service provider network, we would do things very specific to, if I'm working on layer 3, it looks like this, and I plan and I engineer and I do everything like this. If I'm working on a layer 4 service in the mobility space, it looks like this, I plan and I do everything according to that. What we found is that actually doesn't work when we start to think about the type of traffic that we're looking to manage, and that's based on use cases. So think about autonomous cars, think about medical, remote medical capabilities of being able to do remote surgery, things like that. That today, some of that might sound like, yeah, that's still a ways out. We all know that as you're starting to build and plan for your network, you've got to be creating those capabilities now, creating the maturity level, creating the capability, and being able to do that. So for us, we saw this as a real opportunity to start laying the framework that allows us to look at that network almost as if it's a ubiquitous network so that you can look at it across. It can span across multiple layers. It can go across multiple technology platforms. And it really starts to create a capability where we have to count on the crowdsourcing concepts of being able to get innovation and get people to contribute in. So while we have large development teams that are heavily contributing in this as well, we are looking at the community, not just in this space. We actually have several open source initiatives that we're helping to drive. We think they're really important, not just for AT&T, but for the ecosystem of both vendors as well as service providers, as well as just others who are trying to create different types of new functionality, applications, et cetera, that will eventually come into the traditional network space. So again, really important for us to lay this foundation. We expect the maturity will continue to grow and evolve as more contribute and participate. I'll actually show you a slide on that. We've got just under 40% of the global wireless subscribers have said that, yes, they believe this is the right path, and that, yes, this is where they want to also help contribute, and are in various stages. It could be something of a proof of concept. It could be a lab trial. It could be even a little bit further. But really making sure that this isn't an AT&T thing. This is we believe we talk about network operating system. It creates a platform that we can all build upon and actually all help each other to grow in our respective markets, et cetera. We still have, there's another third of the providers who are in various stages of discussions and talking about it. And so we're really excited about the opportunity that ONAP is going to bring. This is a big change into traditional service provider space, and we think there's a huge benefit. We've actually, it's interesting because when we were talking earlier around, when the question was asked about Ericsson, I think the other part of it is that the traditional competitors that have been in our spaces from a service provider are all changing and evolving. And so when we think about it, we've got to really be looking at how do other companies solve some of the same problems we have. There were slides earlier that you saw Google and Facebook and some of the other more traditional web scale type of companies. They're moving into markets and adjacent opportunities that look an awful lot like what a traditional service provider might have looked like. So when you start to think about what we have to do, we've got to start thinking about innovation at a different type of, one, how we think about it, and then two, how we all contribute to actually make the change to drive it all forward. So if I bring this all together, for us, the real importance of this is, and I mentioned this at the beginning, Indigo. So for us, this is about taking not just concepts and ideas and technologies and people and the skills transformation, but it's really about being able to provide a different type of experience for our customers, and also to be able to provide different capabilities that our customers that we have today and the ones we don't have, but that we do see in the future. So when you start thinking about what it means for us, we believe that for us, that our Network 3.0, we call it Indigo, is really about bringing, it's more than the 5G that I talked about in the beginning. But if we do this right as an industry, and we start to think about how you have the software-defined network components, how you have your continual maturation of what happens in your mobile networks, et cetera, and then you start thinking about where are we going as a kind of society. It's about really having data. There was a question earlier about machine learning. There's a lot of conversation about where does artificial intelligence come in. So you have to look at this both from an internal perspective, which is what we're doing at AT&T, to say, how will we use those technologies to enable us? And then the second is, how am I going to enable those customers on what they're going to be doing? And the customers that we don't even actually are talking to yet, but that will actually need that. So for us, the Indigo is all about data-powered everything. We believe that we can actually help in the, in our, I'll say, the economy and our society for figuring out how do we actually bring some of what the service providers have as far as data and the knowledge we have, as well as then being able to help with use cases that we know are going on within the medical community, as well as other areas. So for us, we are very focused on that. We see all these various pieces of the journey that I described as the enablement that will allow us to really provide a different type of experience for our customers, and it will be able to really expand the service offerings that we can provide to our customers. So that's kind of what I had for today, to share a little bit about our journey and where we're at. I don't know if we have a couple minutes for questions or if we're out of time. I know we're behind.